You've probably heard the name Alfred Nobel, right? Of course you have. But I'm willing to bet you don't know the real story behind it. So let's get into it, because this is an incredible tale of invention, total destruction, and maybe, just maybe, the greatest rebranding of all time.
Okay, picture this. The year is 1888. You're sitting down, maybe with your morning coffee, you open up the newspaper, and you read your own obituary. I'm not kidding. This is exactly what happened to Alfred Nobel when a French newspaper published this absolutely brutal summary of his entire life.
Now, turns out, the paper made a huge mistake. It was actually his brother, Ludwig, who had died. But it didn't matter. The damage was done, because in that one single, horrifying moment, Nobel saw exactly how the world was going to remember him. And what he saw wasn't an inventor. It was a monster.
So why? Why did the world see him this way? Well, to get that, we have to go back and look at the powerful and unbelievably dangerous beast he spent his entire life trying to tame.
And that beast was nitroglycerin. We're talking about one of the most powerful explosives ever made. But all that power came at a terrifying cost. This stuff is so unbelievably sensitive that a tiny shock, a little bump, even just shaking it the wrong way could set it off.
So to put this in perspective, think about old-school gunpowder. With gunpowder, you're just mixing a bunch of different ingredients together. But nitroglycerin? Whoa. Everything it needs to explode is already packed into one single molecule. That means the reaction is literally faster than the speed of sound. We're talking a detonation, not just a burn, with a blast pressure that's more than 100 times bigger. It's just on another level.
Right, so you're probably thinking, if this stuff is so powerful, why wasn't it used for everything? Well, that was the big problem, the central puzzle. It was a total paradox. On one hand, it was so unstable it would blow up if you just looked at it wrong, but on the other hand, you couldn't reliably set it off when you actually wanted it to go boom. A simple fuse just wouldn't do the trick.
And this danger wasn't just theoretical. It was horrifyingly real. In 1864, one of Nobel's own factories in Sweden just vanished in an explosion. The blast killed 5 people, and one of them was his 21-year-old brother, Emil. The devastation was just absolute, and you can bet Alfred carried that weight for the rest of his life.
So how do you solve a problem like that? How do you tame this beast? Well, this is where Nobel's genius really shines. He came up with this brilliant 2-part solution. First, he figured out he could soak the liquid nitroglycerin into a porous, dirt-like powder, turning it into a stable, solid paste. That was part 1. Then, for part 2, he invented the blasting cap, basically a small, controlled explosion designed to give the main charge the massive kick it needed to detonate reliably. Absolutely genius.
He'd done it. He had tamed the beast. And this new, stable, powerful explosive needed a name. He called it Dynamite, which comes from the Greek word dynamis, meaning, well, power. Pretty fitting, right?
And with that one invention, Alfred Nobel didn't just get rich. He built a global empire. But it was an empire with a deeply divided legacy, one of incredible creation and, at the same time, unimaginable destruction.
I mean, on the one hand, you can't overstate this. Dynamite literally built the modern world. It's the tool that blasted tunnels through the Alps and the Rockies for railroads. It's what made massive projects like the Panama Canal even possible. It helped build bridges, dams, skyscrapers. It was the engine of progress, full stop.
But there's always a flip side, isn't there? The very things that made dynamite such a fantastic tool, the fact that it was stable, reliable, and easy to get, also made it the perfect weapon for a terrifying new age of violence. And the destruction it caused was just immense. So-called dynamite clubs used it for political bombings on a scale nobody had ever seen. But the absolute worst, in 1927, a man packed a school in Michigan with dynamite and blew it up. He murdered 38 children and 6 adults. It's still the deadliest school massacre in U.S. history. This is why they called him the Merchant of Death.
And that brings us right back to where we started, that morning in 1888. With those words, the Merchant of Death, burning in his mind, Alfred Nobel knew he had to do something. He had to change the story before it was too late.
You know, it's not like he was totally oblivious to the harm his inventions caused. He had this really complicated, maybe even naive belief. He actually thought that if he could make weapons so powerful, so terrifying, that they could wipe out entire armies in a second, then maybe, just maybe, no one would be crazy enough to start a war. It was an early version of the whole mutually assured destruction idea. But that kind of justification just wasn't cutting it. Not when people were calling you a mass murderer.
So haunted by that obituary and knowing his own health was failing, Nobel decided he had one last chance to take a massive, history-changing step to redefine his legacy.
And when I say massive, I mean it. This wasn't some small token donation. He took 94%, let me say that again, 94% of his entire fortune and dedicated it to this one last act. In today's money, that would be hundreds of millions of dollars. Just incredible.
So what did he do with all that cash? In his will, he laid out a plan to use it to create a series of yearly prizes. And these prizes were for people who had given the greatest benefit to humankind, in science, in literature, and, in the most jaw-dropping twist of all, for peace. This was it. This was his final play. A Hail Mary attempt to turn a legacy of death into a legacy of hope. So, the big question is, did it work? After everything, was he actually able to erase that Merchant of Death nickname for good?
Well, the answer is an overwhelming yes. Think about it. When you hear the name Nobel today, what's the first thing that pops into your head? It's the Nobel Prize, right? The highest honor for human achievement. His connection to dynamite, to violence, to death, it's all but forgotten. It might just be the single most successful rebranding in the history of the world.
Which leaves us with one final question to chew on. Was this all just a cynical PR move by a guy who couldn't stand how he was going to be remembered? Or was it a genuine, heartfelt attempt to champion the best parts of humanity? What do you think?